Welcome one, welcome all. Today is Tuesday, so you already know we are back for another edition of NIKKI BANZ Live. Welcome everybody, welcome. I see some folks hopping onto the chat here on Instagram Live. My name is Nicole Banister, aka NIKKI BANZ, your hostess with the mostest. Welcome back to this week's edition of NIKKI BANZ Live. Every single Tuesday, me, your host, NIKKI BANZ, I am interviewing amazing artists, entertainers, creatives, incredible influencers from around the world, highlighting their stories, highlighting their successes, highlighting their challenges so that we can learn from them, grow with them, and just be introduced to incredible, amazing new people from all over the world. I am so excited for my guest today. This is going to be an absolutely phenomenal show here on NIKKI BANZ Live. And it's going to be interesting because our guest today is a journalist. She is a reporter, so she's gonna have to give me a score at the end of this and let me know how I did. Since I'm the one interviewing her for once, and normally she is the one interviewing all sorts of amazing people from around the world. So I am going to give it just a couple moments for all of you tuning in here on Instagram Live. I'm gonna give it just a couple moments for folks to hop on, and then I'm gonna bring in our very special guest for today, Yousra Elbagir. We are so excited to have her here today, folks. Get ready, it's gonna be an amazing interview. And just before we start, gotta give a quick shout out to the one and only Papa Banz. It is my dad's birthday today, so shout out Papa Banz. Drop him some like heart emojis in the chat. Drop him, a little cake emoji or something. Happy birthday, Papa Banz. Love you lots. Most of you know that almost every time I do NIKKI BANZ Live, my parents tune into this live. So it's, it's pretty special. Gotta give Pops the shout out, you know what I mean? All right, everybody, thank you so much for joining. I am your host, Nicole Banister, aka NIKKI BANZ. So happy to have you here today with me for another edition of NIKKI BANZ Live. Today's guest, Yousra Elbagir. She is an award-winning journalist, a writer, a producer, a reporter, a podcast host. So many different things about this phenomenal woman here, and I'm gonna bring her on just now. Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? I'm gonna give it a little drum roll, and I'm gonna invite Yousra on to the live just now. All right. I'm bringing in the woman of the hour. Send her the invitation. She should be hopping on in just a moment. Hello.
I forget how hyper you make me. Your energy always just makes me like, just trying to match you. In London, we're always like I'm just trying to be like you, bro. I'm just trying to be like.
Oh Lord, you heard it here first. Yousra Elbagir trying to be like me. Yo, I'm trying to be like you.
Always. Always.
I'm waiting. You gotta tell me how I do. At the end of this.
Oh yeah. I'll give you a score.
Okay.
I'll give you a score.
Do. Critical feedback, constructive criticism. We like that here.
Always. Honesty.
Yes. Welcome, Yousra. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh,
it's so nice to be.
Thank you so much for coming on this live. We are thrilled to have you here today. Truly thrilled and blessed. Okay, my internet's cutting out for a second. We had this problem last week. I don't know what's going on with my internet. I need to change my cell service provider. If you are in the chat right now, can you give me a thumbs up and tell me if you can hear me? If not, maybe I'll switch to my data. Oh no, we lost Yousra. Okay, I'm gonna try this again. Yousra is in New York, so I'm pretty sure it's not her internet. It's probably mine here in Cape Town. Let me just try again really quick. Get her back in here. Give me one moment. Okay. Just invited her back. Fingers crossed, or hold thumbs, as we say in South Africa. Okay, you're back.
I'm here, I'm back. I went on cellular, I switched off the Wi-Fi, so hopefully this works.
I was literally thinking I was about to do the same thing, and I was like, well, Yousra's in New York, so it's probably my Wi-Fi, not yours.
No. Listen. This is a sham. The signal these days in London and in New York, not great.
Not
great. I think I have better internet in Nairobi than I do here.
Okay, we're gonna put that out there to all the internet service
The
providers.
hypothesis, you guys. Yep.
Yeah, like talk to your people. We try to do an Instagram live here every Tuesday, and we can't connect. Oh my gosh.
In big 2021, we're having signal issues.
Exactly. No, I had issues all last week with my guest Deepak. Like the whole live cut out. It's like in two segments. It's fine. Hopefully that doesn't happen to us.
It's all good. It's all good. How are you?
I'm doing so much better now that you're here with me. I'm
so much better for seeing ya.
Right? Okay, and I have to say, normally I start off NIKKI BANZ Live with every new guest, like introducing like how I know my guest. But in true like journalism fashion, we've got breaking news, okay?
Okay. Oh my God, the horn, I cannot with you. Oh man.
We've got breaking news for everyone who's tuning in right now. So as I'm sure many of you are all aware, there is a major American award show called the Emmys, and the Emmys gives honors and awards for outstanding achievement in television. And I am so thrilled to announce and share here with you all that our guest right at this moment, Yousra Elbagir, Yousra has been nominated for an Emmy.
Oh, thank you. It's just an honor to be nominated, you know?
Thank you. Just happy to be here.
No, but I will say one thing about it, and I told you I didn't want to talk much about it, but one thing I will say is that, you know, when people say like it's an honor to be nominated, genuinely being nominated, it's just the best, because then it becomes winners and losers and politics and this and that and the third. But to just be in the mix with so many people that I respect and love, so many of my friends this year got nominated, and it feels good to get the recognition that the work is actually being seen and recognized. And my nomination is with a group. It's like, you know, my producer, and then it's another package from Brazil. It's two reports from Brazil at the start of the pandemic, and then when we went just before the second wave. So it's just a group effort, and I'm just honestly, I'm like, the last hours before the show, I'm like, I just need to be as excited as possible that I'm nominated before I become a loser, you know, or before like actually like it's over and it's like, okay, khalas, like it's done. So thank you. Thank you.
No, we are so.
And I'm nominated with my sister. My sister Naima is nominated in the same category as me. That for me was like, for me, I'm like, doesn't matter what happens, because it just, you know, she's always mentored me, she's always guided me, and I feel like just to be able to say that I'm in the same category as her is just, it's crazy. It's crazy. We'll never have this again, you know?
It is truly tremendous, and it is a family affair, okay? And we are so excited for you. The chat is like blowing up. People are giving you claps and all the love and inspiration. And you've touched a little bit on how your sister's nominated in the same category as you. Tell us a little bit about your family of journalists and how you first got into journalism and reporting.
So so it is a family of journalists. My parents are both journalists. My dad was always sort of an opposition politician and had a newspaper, and my mum was his publisher. So she was the first female publisher in Sudan. And they inherited it from my grandfather, who was like quite a sort of prolific culture writer, poet, in Khartoum, and at the time where it was like in the 60s, like the resurgence. So he profiled Ibrahim al-Salahi, an incredible Sudanese modernist artist who's inspired like so many artists from the region. People actually, we have a theory that Picasso actually jacked some stuff from al-Salahi in terms of the cubism and stuff. Yeah. Guernica. Okay. Yeah. So like my grandfather's magazine was just very much about sort of showcasing Sudanese talent, but then, you know, and my dad sort of took it over, and then it became the newspaper, and the newspaper was essentially a voice for, you know, dissidents at the time. So it was 1986, the newspaper was established. And when my father had to go into exile in 1989, the newspaper actually started printing out of Egypt, Saudi Arabia, London, the UK, and the UAE. And it was like a space for people who were in exile. So writers like Tayyip Salahi, writers like Abdullah Tayyib, really sort of incredible Sudanese writers, columnists, cartoonists, basically used this space to still be able to have a say, even though they were in exile, on what was going on back in Sudan. So it's called a Khartoum newspaper, and it's a political broadsheet. And it was just really, you know, talking to them about it more recently, even just with my experience, but just seeing how just, I think literally the fight that we still have is just like elbowing, like just trying to carve out space, basically, is like still what we're trying to do to this day. What my parents were trying to do in the 80s is still what we're trying to do now, which is to just create space for people to share their stories, not voices, not giving voice to anyone. It's just creating space, you know? And so my parents, you know, till this day, my dad's newspaper was shut down in October 2015 by the security apparatus. And till this day, he's trying to get it up and running. And, you know, we tell him to go into retirement and stuff. And he's like, the day I stop working is the day that I die, you know? Wow. He'll never let it go. He'll never let it go. But I think, you know, with us, so my siblings and I'm the youngest of 4. My brother is a producer, and so when I first moved to Sudan, I was moved back to Sudan in 2015. I went to school in Sudan from age 8 to 16. And I moved back after I graduated, was working with him on like creating content, sharing stories, and the tag of his production company was Capturing a Shared Humanity. So when I moved back in 2015, there had been very little coverage that wasn't big news events, and this is mainstream coverage. I'm not talking about, you know, people who are writing, you know, obviously there's a constant stream of people writing all the time, but mainstream news coverage was very limited because the government wasn't giving foreign news visas. Like my friend who ran the BBC office got punched in the face by like a plainclothed informant. Like they were really making it a hostile environment for journalists. And Sudan became very synonymous with the Darfur conflict, with the civil war, and there were few stories that kind of reflected, I would say, kind of like a middle-class city, you know, middle-class city kids who, you know, some of them displaced from regions of conflict, but other kids just trying to like, again, carve out space to have like art exhibitions, carve out space to do photography, carve out space. And so I was really lucky because when I moved back in 2015, firstly, my parents had moved back in 2001 when I went to school. So my family home is there. But also just, it was really just nice to be there when I felt like there was like this kind of, it wasn't even a renaissance. It was just kind of everyone had these coping mechanisms with dealing with how constricted and controlled the space was. And so that really came out in the creative, you know, fields, you know, really just incredible artists, photographers, poets, writers. And it was really nice to go back and not feel, and just enjoy it as an adult, young adult, like at 23, but just write about these things. And obviously, yeah, my sister Emma, she's a breaking news, like war correspondent. Very, very serious stuff like genocides. Like right now she's covering the genocide in Tigray. She covered the Darfur conflict when she was 24. And I've always seen her do these very serious, hardcore stories. And actually going back, having her guidance, having her mentorship, but knowing that that's not really what I want to do. I'm not a war correspondent. I think I'm drawn more to stories that cover kind of like sovereignty, resistance, identity, and that can be at the scale of pro-democracy protests that topple a dictator, or at even a smaller scale of just speaking to someone who is, you know, a musician and a Sufi and worships God through his music. So it was really nice early on feeling like, even though, yeah, my parents are political journalists, right? And my sister is a hardcore news war correspondent, and my brother is a video producer, visual producer, and my sister Sophia is a doctor. I never felt like I had to do it a certain way. Like I always felt like I had this space to kind of be like, I'm interested in this, I want to do this. I'm interested in that, I want to do that. And when the time came where I was doing work that was more dangerous and more hardcore, I had all of this incredible knowledge and training and infrastructure, and also just to have parents that are like, yeah, you need to get out there and do it. You know, you're not going to just sit here and like, you know, be on your phone. Not that I wanted to, but in the sense of a lot of people are held back by their parents, you know, and when it comes to dangerous things, when it comes to doing things that are unsafe. And my parents, I mean, yeah, they drive me crazy, make me check in every time like I'm anywhere that's slightly, but so encouraging, you know. It's such a, I really don't take it for granted at all, you know. But yeah, I'm trying to get all the information out the way so I can stop so I can stop talking about myself. I'm like, what else do you want to know?
I feel like you just answered 5 of the prepped questions that I had for you in your opening remarks.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, we done? No, I'm joking. I'm happy to be here.
I'm like, okay, and we're done. We're done. Bye. No.
Okay, we're done. Okay, bye. Peace.
Oh my gosh. No, but I think you touched on so many different issues and things that I could like ask a million questions on, right? You talked about the types of stories that you like to report on and share. You've talked about this tremendous family infrastructure and support that you've had from your mom and your dad and your brother and your sister. You know, you've talked about what it's like to sort of be out there and put yourself out there in a place like Sudan and talk about like people's lived experiences and lived realities from a number of different angles and perspectives. So I think, you know, I think something that you said that really resonated with me was this idea of carving out space for storytelling. That really stuck with me and resonated with me, because I think that's one of the things that you do so tremendously and so beautifully, right? Like when we look at your portfolio of the types of interviews or reports that you've done and the types of people, it's all over the place. Like there's all sorts of types of folks that you've engaged with through your reporting, whether it's family members of ousted presidential leaders or it's NBA players like Luol Deng, right? Like it's just all over the place. What is it like for you to be able to share these stories, you know, coming from so many different diverse and dynamic perspectives? Do you ever feel like you have to like code switch at all, or is it kind of like, is it quite easy to talk?
The
to all
code
these
switching, permanent. I really, like, I initially used to be like, man, why is my accent all over the place? Like, why do I sound British sometimes? Why do I sound American sometimes? Why do I speak like and I realized, like, growing up, we were code switching all the time. Like I'll literally speak to aunties and be like, "Ahlan, khaltu kafik, how are you? Kaf al-ahwal?" And then you go and you're with your friends who are like, and this is a Khartoum, like your friends is shabab, and you're like, "Ya man, isma' hinay, like, and you're just talking like you know. And then London, whenever I'm in London, immediately I'm like, bruv. And then I'm here in New York, and people. I'm here in New York, and honestly, people can't tell. They can, sometimes I'll throw out a word and they'll be like, "Are you from London?" But most of the times it's blend, you know? And I think it took a while for me to like lean into that and be like, okay, I'm an international school kid, right? And I have, one of my friends are international school kids. And going to St. Andrews was me being with people who were like, I had friends from India, like my closest friends, my flatmate Far is Indian. I had a Moroccan flatmate, my friend, you know, like people who were from like everywhere. And I think for a while, I kind of had that obviously very kind of cliche diaspora dilemma of like, where do I belong? Right. You know, like, where is home? And you know, and now I'm just like, I don't want to belong anywhere. I don't want to be fixed to anywhere. Like, I'm cool with just floating around and blending in and chilling and whatever. And I think with work, that agility has been really useful, really useful. You know, like, for example, I was in Nigeria early in the year, and it was my first time in West Africa. And it felt just so amazing. And I was in the north and really leaned into the fact I'm a Black Muslim, I'm a Black African Muslim, and the north in Nigeria is very Muslim. So that was where I connected with people, you know. When I'm in, you know, when I'm in America, like you can connect with people. Like there's always a shared thing you can connect with, always. Even when I've met people who are from completely drastically different backgrounds, and it's like, oh, you know, you're a Scottish American. I went to uni in Scotland, you know, like there's always a way. And I think that I really, there was a moment there growing up where I felt kind of lost in the middle of everything, especially when I moved back to London from going to school in Sudan. And I felt kind of like fresh off the boat, 100%. People would be like, freshie, freshie. And I'm just like, yeah, I'm literally fresh off the plane from Sudan, you know? And now everyone's all like, yeah, Afrobeat, oh yeah. But back in the day, moving back to London as a 16-year-old from Sudan, like people were raw. Like people were just like, oh, you're a freshie, you're a refugee or whatever, whatever. And for me, it was always a shock because I come from a very privileged background in Sudan. And I was like, okay, weird, because in Sudan, the dynamic is completely different. In Sudan, I have the privilege of a white woman, you know? Wow. And then you go to London and that privilege is kind of just snatched from you, you know? And then you're kind of like just a bit dizzy and homesick and confused. And I think that I said to a friend recently, like, I feel like my life has been a piece of culture shocks, you know? And now I think that accumulative process of like integration, reintegration, integration has actually really helped me feel more, again, adaptable, agile. And I always, for example, I always tell my friends, I feel like Sudanese people, wherever I meet them, are so adaptable. Like they will adapt to any situation. You know this. Mm-hmm. And that's really helped. It's really, no, it's like really, really helped. And I think the more I travel, the more that I'll be able to kind of have more to share with people, you know? So it's really nice. I think with work, one thing that I keep thinking about kind of incessantly is that, okay, if I look at the craft of journalism, what our craft really is, other than like all the broadcast stuff or like knowing how to write a script or knowing how to speak on camera or whatever, our real responsibility is keeping our contributors safe. It's being a safe space for people to share. And that, you know, that doesn't obviously go for politicians or people who are like public figures who actually have a responsibility to be super transparent and open. They can get it. They can get challenged any day of the week. But I think that in terms of just, I'm not even just saying vulnerable people. Like, I think whenever you have a conversation with someone and you're expecting a level of honesty and openness, like they need to feel safe. The person needs to feel comfortable. They need to feel like held, you know? And this is just a general standard. That's just the baseline. But then, of course, when you add elements of like danger, vulnerability, security issues, like that, your only job is to make sure that you don't leave and the people that you worked with get screwed. And we're seeing that now with Afghanistan, where all of these media companies have it is their responsibility to ensure the safety of everyone that they have ever worked with. And if you can't, then you're exploitative. Because if you're willing to kind of dip in and just you know, take people's stories and sell them on with no consideration of how painful it is for them to even relive these memories, or how painful it is for them to even share, let alone the security issues, let alone the exposure, then you are not equipped. Then you should be doing something else. You should be working in reality television, straight up. Mm-hmm. And of course, things happen, and people, you know, people get arrested and stuff, but then you have failed, and you have to deal with that as a journalist. And I would say, you know, looking at the 2019 revolution in Sudan, I think my biggest accomplishment was that no one I interviewed got arrested. And I'm still, to this day, I'm like,
Alhamdulillah.
Everyone was getting arrested, bro. We were nearly arrested several times. The fact that me and Salah, my director of photography, wasn't arrested, like to this day, I'm like, you know, what can I say? Like, I just make a joke at it. I'm like, you know, I'm a good luck charm or whatever. But seriously, like, this is not a joke. It's not a joke. And I think a lot of people now, I see a lot of people kind of be like, I want to be an activist. I want to be a journalist. I want to be these. And I think they have an idea of what it means to do these things. And they like kind of like the visibility of these jobs. But it's not a joke. It's a huge responsibility. And it's very dangerous. And it's not just dangerous for you. It's dangerous for your family. It's dangerous for the people that you come into contact with. And so this is what I mean. It's not just carving out space just to chat. It's literally cordoning off a section of like, I'm here with you, whatever you, and like I've had situations recently like where people have done interviews, but then been a bit nervous about it being shared, and me having to navigate, okay, you know, no matter how many times you tell someone, they can still change their mind, and kind of having to deal with that sensitively, you know. Just now in Nigeria, there was a woman who we interviewed who was kidnapped by Boko Haram when she was 17, and she had a baby by the Boko Haram militant that she lost when she was escaping because they were starving. And it was just horrific, like extreme, just horrible. And I remember asking her, you know, like I honestly asked her maybe like 5 to 10 times over and over, are you sure you want to show your face? You don't have to. You don't have to. Right. We can do this with your face. And she was just like, no, I want to. And eventually I was like, okay, I'm not going to baby her. Like this is empowering for her. She wants to speak about her experience and she feels safe now, and that's good. But it's so easy to deceive people into thinking, oh, it's not gonna, you know, oh yeah, we'll just show you. And I know I have so many friends who like have worked with people who have had no consideration for their contributors, have been super exploitative. You know, we mentioned the Emmys, but I have to also really critique this awards culture that has really degraded the quality of journalism that we're seeing, where people will actually kill for an Emmy. Like journalists will actually, for a BAFTA or for an award, will actually resort to very exploitative modes of working. And I wish it wasn't common. Like I wish it was like a one-off thing, but it's become kind of like the industry standard, which is really upsetting. And so I think it's like, how do you find a balance between, you know, and the answer is there's no balance. There's no balance. Like there's no balance between self-serving career actions and the work, because I don't think you deserve an award if you have gone into a place, had no consideration for the people there, have done your film, left, and people have, if there's collateral damage, you failed.
Right. Yousra, again, you have touched on so many different things that I could continue speaking about and asking questions about. You know, but I think one of the things that you've touched on in terms of your personal background, your personal life story, being this cultural chameleon, moving to so many different places and spaces, getting to experience life in many different cities and countries. You know, I think, and also, you know, being from Sudan, having this Sudanese background and heritage, being from the continent, I think one of the things that really shines through is your cross-cultural capital and the way that you're able to build authentic, genuine relationships with the types of people who you interview and the types of stories that you share. And I think that's, you know, when we think about like, why weren't you arrested in Sudan? Or when we think about like, you know, the courage that you gave this woman in Nigeria to be able to show her face, and the courage that she had when speaking to you. And I think that's a real testament to sort of who you are and how you're able to navigate the world.
Like, so stop it.
No, I'm giving you all the love because it's true. But the question here then for me is, you know, I think, again, when we talk about you holding space for people to share their stories in real and authentic ways, you know, I think it's a lot of it has to do with the fact that you are of the continent, from the continent, sharing stories that a lot of people aren't hearing anywhere else, and they aren't hearing otherwise. So how have you been able to shed light on stories from across the continent, issues affecting the diaspora? How have you been able to do that in a world where the reality is, and me being here in Cape Town, South Africa, I know for a fact that my friends and family back in the United States or in Europe aren't receiving this type of content, but you have these major international platforms where you share what's happening here and the realities and real stories. So how are you able to do that in this world of modern journalism that exists today?
This is gonna sound like I'm not bullshitting. It's literally team effort, collaborative, 100%. It's not just the fact, like it's commissioners in these channels who. So I don't really do, like, I won't deal with a network and be like, oh, CNN or this. I will deal with the individuals who I trust and who I've worked with consistently in those institutions. And it's an editor who is like gonna challenge you. It's an editor who will want to who wants to share these stories, and then producers who are incredibly like equipped with this acumen of like facilitation and like working with them. And also I'm a producer as well, so it's like me, you know, a producer who's willing for me to produce as well, because I'm not just going to be like, oh, I'm on the camera now and then switch on and then switch off. Like I'm heavily involved in the stories that I do, but it's genuine. It's a team effort. There's no like, there's like, even I just did a film in Germany on Germany's colonial imprint, and it's sort of erasure of the experiences of Africans that they colonized and stolen artifacts, and just the legacy and the fight for reclamation. This is a story that was pitched to me, you know, like I never, like I lived in Berlin for 11 months and I used Berlin as a base. I was in and out of Berlin. I was not engaging with Germany work-wise. It was kind of like just a sanctuary for me to fly in and out of, where I felt kind of confident about their COVID regulations and stuff. I moved back to London in July, and 5 days after I moved back, I get a call from a producer, Liam O'Hare, and he was like, Yousra, do you want to do, literally just picked up the phone, hey, there's a story, there are anti-colonial protests in Hamburg this weekend, do you want to go? And I was like, yep, okay. You know, okay, we're leaving in 2 days. Yeah, we're leaving in 2 days. You down for that? Yeah, I'm down. Just hang up. Like, it's not like, and then the story becomes so much more because we're involved and we're coming together. And we had an editor who was just like, do what you guys want. I trust you guys, you know? And so we were able to make a film that we felt really strongly about, that we felt reflected. 8 minutes, you know, I'm getting more used to doing long form now, but 8 minutes for me in the beginning was tough because I was like, it's so short. But I was like, we're just happy to inject this into the mainstream, like to even if it's 8 minutes, it's still, you know, it's still gonna, it's accessible, you know, people can watch it for 8 minutes. It's really kind of digital first, you know, like I'm not attached to like, oh, it has to be on TV. I used to be like, okay, well, TV is like, that's what people gather around, but not anymore. Obviously that's changed so much. And so again, it's like, even when it came to Sudan and revolution, I am not the most well versed on Sudan's history. There are incredible Sudanese historians, Sudanese economists, Sudanese intellectuals. I was just in a really good position. I was in a really, you know, just a position of access, privilege. I kind of I had straddled both worlds for 5 years before things happened. So it was just being able to use whatever tools, whatever vehicles I have to kind of make sure that there's an honest depiction being shared. And that's still the case. I still feel like, okay, I have a position of like, you know, I'm in a situation where I kind of can see both sides, not in the sense of like, oh, there's a Western world and a non-Western world, not at all. But in the sense of, I know that the local audience have a very high standard of what they expect in terms of complexity. And then the Westerner or outsiders they need it to kind of be paleted in a way where they can kind of understand it, but you don't want to pander to their, you know, perception, but in the sense of, you want it to be accessible. And so it's popular messaging without populism, you know, it's like, how do I take something that's kind of niche, feels maybe niche to an editor in London or New York or whatever, and try and it's something very interesting and through like a microcosmic experience or like someone's story, then you can kind of understand things a bit more broadly. And I think editors are more and more becoming open to that because they understand that there's an entire audience of diasporic kids from the continent, from the global south, who are like really engaged and who are setting the agenda. So it's like, it's that awareness of like, okay, yeah, of course, establishment media, they're still the gatekeepers and they still have the power to decide what the conversation is. But we have the power now to regulate how we're being spoken about and how our stories are being told, you know? So it's we have both, the power. We have the power, but it's both sides coming together. Like I at the end of the day, like, I value so much the editors, sort of the old school journalists, that, you know, it could be so easy to just dismiss that generation and be like, oh, well, we're the new generation. No, they have so much experience. They've seen so many different eras. They understand the craft. Like, I honestly, like, I have had so many great editors. Cheryl Simpson, actually, who was on this earlier, I hope she's still on. She was my boss at Vice. Yeah, it was my first, like, correspondent job. She was my boss. And I remember Cheryl just was like, you know, go out there and do it. Like, there was never like a micromanaging element. And, you know, even with the revolution, Lillian Landor at Channel 4 News, again, she would basically be like, you tell me what the story is right now. You know, I'm not going to tell you what it is. And at the same time, still was so incredible in shepherding me. Like, we need to be shepherded. This is what I'm trying to learn now more so, is because, like, I have an issue with authority. I must say, I have an issue with authority. I put my hands up. But I'm trying to learn how to be a better student, because I'm like, I need to absorb as much of this, like, wisdom and experience from these people as possible. Sure. If we're actually gonna find a middle ground between sort of the old guard and the new guard, they can just be such a happy medium where it's like, yeah, all the innovation of new media, but with the same sort of principles that journalism was originally built on, which is just, you know, non-judgmental observation that can create a shared understanding between people, you know, and, like, actually depict events for what they are, not what we think they are, not what we want them to be, but actually correcting the historical record and making sure it's truthful. And so it's been really nice more recently. Like, I would say that after the revolution, I was really not well. Like, I felt really unwell because I did 9 months of hardcore coverage with no sort of sense of taking care of myself or understanding that, okay, I'm going to burn out. But it was adrenaline fueled, and it felt like there was no time to rest. There was no time to rest, that every second was valuable. And after that, I crashed, and the pandemic started and lockdown started. I crashed. I was doing a bit more writing, but I was still working a lot, and I still kind of wasn't giving myself the space to take time. But I went freelance. So I was like, I can't have a staff job anywhere because I can't deliver consistently. I'm not feeling good. And taking that time to work on myself, and I have to say, literally, I've worked to become a reliable narrator. Like, I've really worked to try and become a reliable narrator. Not only like, obviously learning from whatever mistakes I made during that year and have made before then and will continue to make, and fine-tuning my work, fine-tuning my, like, engagement, but also, like, within myself, trying to clean up whatever, like, and it's not all like, oh, trauma happens and suddenly it's like, no, we're all dealing with, like, years and years and, like, a lifetime of memory, you know, in our body, and you know, we're constantly being triggered, constantly confronting these memories. And I know that unless I'm clean on the inside, or at least, like, working to be clean, then I will be projecting, and that's not a reliable narrator, right? Like, if I'm dealing with my trauma from being a child of exile because of the colonialists in Sudan and all this stuff, yeah, of course I am. But if I'm bringing that to a story about Germany's colonial legacy, I'm carrying a lot of anger. And, like, I'm at a space now where I let myself feel those things, like, feel that resentment that I have, but in an appropriate way, where I'm like, okay, of course, like, this is triggering for me, but that's cool. And then when I show up to an interview, I'm not carrying that. I'm trying to just come as, like, an observer, and you know, and looking at, like, being critical, not just of, like, who we think deserves criticism, but critical of everyone and everything, and knowing that, you know, everyone has the capability of doing these things. It's not just because you're black or white or whatever. It's whether you're enabled in that, you know, whether you're enabled in your corruption, you know, and obviously, like, the global system enables white men, But at the same
Right.
time, in Sudan, I've seen Sudanese men who are perceived as black do the same shit because they're white men in that system. So just trying to be more, like trying to be more fluid about my perception of things and understanding that it's not static and it's not fixed and it's not just what I thought it is, you know, where there's oppressed, oppressor, victim, bully, but that it's like everyone has capacity to move along that spectrum and be both, be everything, you know. So working on myself is the only way for me to kind of feel comfortable taking on these challenges more and more, because I just feel like if I don't evolve or I don't grow, I'm going to be doing a disservice to people, you know?
And I so appreciate you sharing a little bit more about the realities of what it means to try and work through this trauma, work through the types of experiences that you've had as a journalist, as a reporter, as a producer. And I want to talk a little bit more about Sudan, but I just want to give a quick little reminder to everybody who's on the live chat here on Instagram. We do have a little question box. So if you want to ask Yousra some questions, you're more than welcome to. We're going to take the last 10 minutes and have her answer your questions live.
Oh my God,
so
it's 10 minutes.
we have 20 minutes left, but I'll give folks 10 minutes to
Yo, time flew though.
I know. Well, that's because you're just such a great narrator. You're just telling us your
No,
whole
no,
life
it's
story.
your energy. Your energy is so good.
Yes. So just remember, everybody, if you're here on the Instagram live, see that little bubble with the question mark in it. You can drop questions for Yousra there, and I will ask those questions for her toward the end. So please feel free to ask some questions. I see some other journalists and reporters who I know are here on this live. I'm looking at my girl Wafa from Egypt. So yeah, we know y'all got your questions. So feel free to drop those in that little question bubble for Yousra. And so I didn't share this at the beginning of the live, but so Yousra and I know each other from Sudan and from our amazing mutual friend Amani. So shout out Amani, she's the plug always.
Yeah, man, it's a big plug.
I know, big plug. So I visited Sudan. I visited Khartoum in 2018, the end of 2018, and that's where I met Yousra and so many other amazing Sudanese people from the diaspora, the Sudanese diaspora, which, like you said, the Sudanese diaspora is super agile all over the world. I bumped into a Sudanese American diplomat in an elevator in Cairo, and she was like, "I think I saw you in Khartoum, like on an Instagram."
We're infiltrators.
Like, okay.
We're infiltrators. We insidiously like enter the system.
Exactly. Everyone thinks that like the Nigerians are all over the world because they're like the most loud about it, but really the Sudanese are everywhere, y'all. I'm telling you. And an incredibly dynamic and phenomenal community of people. Anyway, so that's where Yousra and I first met. And so we met in Sudan, and actually while we were in Sudan at the end of 2018, the kickstarting of the revolution actually happened, right? And I didn't it was so funny because I didn't tell my parents until like months and months later, right? Like it was like somewhere in the middle of 2019, and they were like, "Hey, Nicole, like there's this big revolution happening in Sudan. Like, did you see anything while you were there?" And I was like, "Yeah, well, I didn't want to tell you."
There was a lag.
There was definitely some roadblocks, some military, and so my parents were like, "What?" But anyway, that was a very.
But we had the wedding, so we were kind of like confused because it was like this bubble that we were in, and then it was like this slow like build up where the protests just went from being like, okay, we should watch this, we should keep an eye on this, then being like, oh, okay, this feels different. It's different.
A full-on revolution. Exactly. So I guess my last question for you, before we start answering some of the questions in the chat, remember, keep posting your questions in that little bubble for Yousra. But I guess my last question is like, you were obviously already an established reporter and journalist before Sudan, before the Sudanese revolution, but your accessibility, being there on the ground, being live, sharing stories while you were there, being someone from Sudan, it's not someone foreign coming in and reporting. It was you in Sudan sharing out to the world. And you talked about accessibility earlier. And you were doing this on social media and platforms where people could really see what was happening and hear from you and hear from other people, other influencers on Instagram and Twitter who were sharing sort of, things that were happening in real time. So for you, being from Sudan, having this incredible sort of privilege that you said to kind of be in the right place at the right time, how has that experience of covering the revolution, how has that changed your life, not just in terms of necessarily, I guess, sort of putting you at the forefront of being this tremendous journalist, but just in terms of like, you talked a little bit like about your mental health, about, thinking about generational trauma. You've talked about sort of how you like to share stories. Like, talk to us a little bit about what Sudan did for you, to you, as a woman, as a Sudanese amazing woman journalist.
I mean, it was obviously probably the most transformative experience of my life thus far, I would say. Honestly, I don't like, I really like can't even glamorize it, or even like, it was very nurturing in the sense, honestly, it was horrible. I'll be honest with you. It was really horrible. It was awful. It was awful. It was just horrifying. It was like, it was just going up against the machine in its ugliest, cruelest form. It was horrific. I think that, like, to say anything, yeah, of course, I learned so much. I made really like lifelong friendships. I met people that I will never forget. I had to do so many things for the first time. We made like 30 films, 30 films that we basically directed and shot and did everything, like edited everything. And it's just, yeah, it still haunts me. It was haunting. It had moments of just like pure euphoria, pure like community, like just the most extraordinary moments. But I also remember in it, like, I think that like it was definitely glorified a lot. And I also have to say, I also, at some points glorified it and was like, this, incredible pro-democracy sit-in camp. And it's just like, it was like, we were living a future. We were living a reality that everyone had only ever dreamed of, which was that Bashir was no longer president, and that we were all able to be in this space together, and everyone was able to say what the fuck they wanted, and everyone was able to just be like, And then with the massacre, it was like this very stark, dark, cruel reminder that we're not like, going up against guns, you're always going to lose, in a way. And I think right now, seeing, obviously, transitions are really, difficult and complicated, and things take time. But I think it's been really kind of despairing and depressing to see that, like, Bashir was a scapegoat, he was one guy that everyone pinned everything on. And like, obviously we can still talk shit about the people that were working with him that are now in government. But there are so many, there is a social structural issue that is still very much like in play. That means that women aren't safe, children aren't safe, that people are getting like attacked, that people are like within their own homes, sort of marinating in dysfunction, in corruption, that like civilians who are charged with like seizing assets from the former ruling party are putting money in their pockets. And I think that it was an incredibly sobering experience. I would say, I would call it sobering, where sobering in the sense of I now kind of know more what people are capable of, both good and bad. And I also know individually, personally, that I can handle like extremely stressful, dangerous environments, which is good for me to know in terms of work. But I think that I still am trying to not even come to terms, I'm trying to accept the fact that all of that happened and all of those people died. And things aren't, better for the average person who needs to feed their family and that for me is it's a very painful reality to keep having to confront. And being in Sudan just now was awful because kids are still getting killed, you know. So I think I'll spend my whole life trying to sort of fix my relationship with Sudan, just for the sake of my personal health, and also for me to be able to know how to serve better and be better in terms of the work I do around Sudan. Like, I don't really engage with like journalism with Sudan that much anymore because I'm like gearing up to do stuff that I feel could be more useful and more penetrative. And so I think just leaving Sudan in July, leaving my parents' house in June, I just had this sort of like, I need to accept that this country, my country, is not going to get better in my lifetime, you know? And that's that, and I have to be okay with that. I have no choice. And I think that that's like kind of the first step of me kind of healing from that, not just that experience, but healing from the fact that my whole life, I have never been able to live in my own country comfortably with the people that I love, safely, happily, because of so many things, you know. And it just sucks, but it's the reality for so many people. Like, it's not just, you know, it's so many people are like scattered around the world. I'm a very extremely privileged and blessed individual amongst them. But you know, it's just like, it's like you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. You're not in Sudan, you feel a longing, you want to be home, you want to be with everyone. You're in Sudan and it's just awful. It's just dreadful. So I would say that, like, if I'm honest about the experience, it's an experience that I will spend my life trying to kind of understand and trying to contextualize, but also trying to keep learning from and being more honest with myself about just how fraught my relationship with Sudan is, you know?
Yousra, I know I speak for myself and probably everybody else who's on this live here, but we cannot thank you enough for your honesty, your rawness, your transparency. And I think, like, more often than not, you know, things like Emmy nominations and being an award-winning journalist can sort of mask the fact that the work that you do is really, really hard. So we really appreciate you sharing and being honest about these experiences, because I think these are not the type of real and raw dialogues that normally happen. Look, I'm even tearing up now.
Yeah, I'm trying to wipe my face.
I know. I'm like,
thank you.
Crying on the IG live, but I think it's just like this is the reality of doing really difficult work and being an empath and trying to tell real stories, because the reality of real stories is that they're most of the time not really happy, and they're not the easiest. So,
the world is not a happy place. Like, I think that, like, it's, you know, obviously the world is life is so beautiful, but it's just painful, and suffering is obviously, everyone is suffering, even people who don't seem like they're suffering are suffering. And I think just knowing that, like, no one has the monopoly on oppression or on suffering or on pain. We're all kind of just trying to figure out how to keep going every day while feeling these things, you know.
And I think, like you've mentioned before, storytelling, sharing our stories, speaking our truth, sharing honest narratives about what's going on either in our lives or in other people's lives is such a critical part of that journey and of that movement for us to get to a place of healing, whether it takes 10 years, 50 years, 100 years, probably won't be in our lifetime, like you said, right? We're probably never going to have that relationship. I think about, like, my mom and coming from Iran, and I'm just like, I'm 30 years old and I've never been to Iran because of the geopolitical turmoil between the United States and Iran. And I don't know if I'm ever going to have that experience. And I don't know if women in Iran will ever have the rights and the responsibilities and the opportunities, you know, that I would want for them. So you know,
and you know what's crazy about that, Nicole, is that, like, going for you at any point is always going to be good and bad, you know. Like, it could be the most amazing and empowering experience, but then it's going to be kind of like that sense of frustration, you know, that, like, you're not kind of, like, allowed to have both in a way, you know. You can't have security and safety and stability and also fully embrace your identity, which is Persian, you know. And it's like, you have to pick and choose, and then you realize that neither is stable and neither is safe, and we're all fucked. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. What do we do now? It's all
bro, I'm so close to just getting a coffee farm in Eastern Sudan and just tapping out and being like, I'll just be here. I'm gonna just be here, wait for climate change. Just like,
I know. There's a couple of like coastal beachy cities in Cape Town where I'm like, I'm just gonna buy a house here and it's just gonna be me and the ocean and that's it. Like that's
I'm be done with it. I'm be done with it.
Exactly. Okay, well, Yousra, I want to give a little bit of time to answer some of the questions in the chat. We have about 5 minutes left, but I know it's a big night for you, so I want to make sure I get you out of this live on time. Okay.
There's no night. I'm literally not even watching it. I'm not even watching it, I don't think. I think I'm just going to go chill with my friend who produced. You know what's funny is that me and my friend who produced the piece that we got nominated for, we were meant to meet today regardless. And then we both realized what day it was after we were already planning to meet. And she was like, so do you want to do something? I'm like, we're going to just do, what we were going to do is just chill.
Yeah. We're just going to chill and see what happens.
And just wait to get a text. I don't know.
Right. It's serendipitous. Yeah. It was meant to be.
Yeah.
Y'all were meant to be together today. Okay, so I'm looking at the questions in the chat. Okay, let's ask this question. It's a little bit lighter than what we've been talking about. This question from our dear friend and esteemed journalist Wafa. Wafa says, I know you're a big fan of music, Yousra, so what are you currently listening to?
Bruv, I cannot get out of the 70s. I am trapped in a 70s
really
like box. I've just been listening to funk the whole time. We saw Roy Ayers in concert on Sunday. But yeah, no, I'm listening to some Cuban funk. I really like this song called Onda. You can find it on Spotify. I've been listening to Roy Ayers more because I like just was so excited to see him, but just like listening to him, like all his sort of big tracks. Johnny Guitar Watson. I've been listening to Prince a lot recently. Just like it's very random. It's very random. It'll be like bossa nova. And then like, you know, Algerian funk from the 70s. So it's all over the place. I am actually going to curate a Sudan playlist with Habibi funk soon. So that's going to be sort of the Sudan songs that I like. But yeah, I'll share some songs with you. I'll send you a playlist.
I love it. I want that playlist too, Yousra.
Yeah, I got you, bro. I got you.
We have a question from Nalumino. I hope I'm saying your name correctly. Nalumino, who asks, how much of Sudan have you documented, especially living history?
Oh man, I would say I've barely scratched the surface, if I'm honest. And I'm actually working on like sort of deeper, longer term research project where I'm sort of looking more at history and colonial memory and stuff. So that's what I'm developing now, and that's going to be looking more at living history. But I think what I've done like with Sudan has been a mix of like cultural coverage and like quite a hardcore news coverage from, I'd say, December 2018 to November 2019. I've kind of taken a step back in terms of like the fast journalism, like not covering the day-to-day as much because I just honestly can't keep track, and it's also quite painful because it's just like painful party politics and you know and a lot of kind of nonsense, but just trying to go deeper. So inshallah soon I'll be like doing more stuff, but definitely not kind of churning it out anymore, you know.
Okay, so kind of an interesting mix of some upcoming opportunities of sort of documenting and sharing living history in Sudan, while also setting those boundaries, which are so important for healing. Setting boundaries on you know what types of content you'll be sharing. So the last question that we have in the chat, Yousra, is from Julia. And Julia is asking, what are some more authentic news sources that you would recommend online or otherwise? I love that question.
That's a really great question. And to be honest, like I would say I would always recommend following journalists that you trust over like over an outlet, because it's always a mixed bag. So even like outlets that I've always kind of loved are always going to have sort of like more kind of right-wing voices, left-wing voices. So My recommendation would just be kind of like following specific people whose work you really like and who have a good track record, and you know, who you really fuck with. So I would say that over outlets. And there are quite a few journalists that I really love and respect. If you go on my Twitter, I usually just only share their stuff and no one else. So yeah, so I would just recommend, yeah, going on an individual basis. I'm yet to find a media outlet that is like, I would only go to that outlet for something. Like I go to things, you know, go to different, I love the FT at the end of the day when it comes to newspapers. The FT has a really close space, you know, like a very, I really love the FT. I've always loved the FT. The Africa coverage is really good because David Pilling, the Africa editor, is an amazing journalist. Love visual investigations. The New York Times visual investigations team are genius. Like the work that they're doing in terms of like verifying, you know, information, verifying attacks, verifying, you know, and also very human storytelling. So I would definitely look at like New York Times visual investigations. CNN, I would say. My sister, I have to say, Nirma, is doing amazing work on CNN. I gotta say it. But. So yeah, I think just dabbling is always good when it comes to that stuff. The New Yorker, I love, like, so there's some amazing writers at the New Yorker who I'm obsessed with. Sorry, Nalomino, I'll just repeat what I said because you missed the answer, which is basically that I'm kind of being more selective about the work I do around Sudan, so less sort of day-to-day news coverage, but sort of like more deep research work that will take me longer. But also, to your question, I feel like I've barely scratched the surface of covering lived history in Sudan. I think I captured a moment in 2019. And a moment in 2015, 2016 when I first moved back. But the situation is fluid, right? So I'm trying to do deeper work that kind of looks more at the history and can actually be applied more universally, you know?
You've just taught me something that I've actually never thought about before. I've never thought to just follow like individual journalists before. I don't know why. Yeah. Like I think I do naturally. Like there are some people who I follow, but I've never like thought about it in those terms. So I love that suggestion, and I'm totally gonna heed that advice moving forward.
Seriously.
I think that's super important because then you build rapport and you trust their content, you trust what they share. That's
fantastic. And even if they fuck up and do, look, journalists always make mistakes. Like everyone makes mistakes, right? But I think the best journalists will put their hands up and be like, correction, retraction. You know, I made a mistake. But also, like, and that's been for me like one of the most transformative experiences of the revolution is learning how to do that, because it's very difficult when you are like defensive and it's a really tense environment. So learning to be like, yo, I was wrong, my bad. No attachment to like the mistake and be like, my bad, like, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, there's another question.
I think Julia's
the follow-up.
She said, how does she find these individual journalists? Like, do you have recommendations on that?
Twitter. So Twitter is really good for that. And I think with Twitter, like, you know, journalists are always sharing their work on Twitter, but also like there's some good, you can do lists. And with lists, you kind of like put like, okay, for Sudan, I'm following these people. For Iran, I'm following these people, you know? So Twitter is always a really good space. There's a lot of like yapping on Twitter, a lot of like pontificating, obviously, but I think that like there are certain journalists that I feel like are really good at cutting through the noise, you know, and just delivering facts, you know.
Love that. Okay, we're gonna make a list for you, Julia. We're gonna try and
I'm gonna have to sit down, make a list, but I'll get some friends to help me so that it's not just my biases, my bias list of like my friends.
We would love that. Okay, so we're at the hour mark right now, Yousra, and I just want to say thank you so much. It has been so incredibly enlightening hearing your story and just getting a little bit more insight into how you think, the types of stories that you share, your intersectional background and identities, and how you use those to navigate this world of journalism and reporting that you're in. Is there any final shout outs, plugs, things that we should keep an eye on that's coming out from you? Like, give us your
Oh, with
promos.
me.
Yeah,
Oh,
like
there's no
anything we should
promo, no promo.
like.
I'm like, I have nothing. I've got nothing. I mean, I'm chilling right now. I'm writing a few things, but no, I mean, I just think that like, let's just be kind to each other and be understanding. And like, it's very easy to be outraged all the time, and there's a lot to be outraged by. But I think that like, let's try and like exercise some patience and some like critical thinking, and like just, you know, cut through the noise as much as we can, and like just take care of ourselves and like try and like stay like clear-eyed, you know.
Love it, love it.
All I got.
Wise
That's
words
it.
from
I'm
a
done.
truly wise woman.
Oh, thank you for having me. Thank you for carving out space for me. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh my gosh.
This is so
Yo,
nice.
thank
Thank
you
you
so
so
much,
much.
Yousra. Yo, it has been an absolute pleasure. Good luck tonight. Good luck with everything. We're following,
Thank
we're watching.
you.
We got you on Instagram. You are an absolute treasure. It was truly my pleasure.
Thank you
And
so much.
thank you for being on NIKKI BANZ Live.
Thank you.
All
Peace.
right. Bye, Yousra. Bye, everybody. See you next week on NIKKI BANZ
Bye.
Live.
See you next week. Bye.
Yes. Bye.